I want you to think for a second. Do you love fast food? Now, I can tell you right now, I adore fast food. Fast food is one of my favorite things. Well, especially because I'm not married yet, so I haven't been able to make myself food because I can't cook at all. So I rely heavily on fast food, quite probably too often. Now, I know it's probably one of the most unhealthy habits for me to have, but I gotta say, I love fast food. Now, I want to ask you another question. Uh, which fast food chain do you think would be the most successful? What is the most successful fast food chain? Now I know it. You're probably already thinking McDonald's. McDonald's is one of the most successful fast food chains with over 14,000 uh, restaurants just in business, 14,000 stores all around the world. It is so widely known. McDonald's is one of the biggest known fast food restaurants in existence. But I can tell you something that might shock you. McDonald's stores are not the most successful. Each store individually is not the most successful store. There's one fast food chain that makes more money per store per year than McDonald's. Any idea what that is? It's Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A makes more money per store per year than any McDonald's chain. It actually makes over $500,000 more per store per year than any McDonald's store, and that kind of blows my mind almost because you think about it. Every Sunday after church, what are you always craving? Chick-fil-A. But Chick-fil-A is always closed on Sundays. They spend an entire 24 hours on Sunday where the entire franchise is shut down. It's not just the CEOs, it's not just the managers. The entire store is always shut down on Sundays. And I know it's a big bummer to us, but it should be something that makes us think. Because if a store that's not even open 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, it's open about 13 hours a day. How can a store make over $500,000 more a year that's open less than 100 hours a week than McDonald's? McDonald's is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is open 100 hours more per week than Chick-fil-A. So how in the world is Chick-fil-A beating them by $500,000? Well, I want to ask you something. If Chick-fil-A can honor a biblical principle and make more money per year than the greatest known fast food chain, then I would ask you something. Do you think that maybe, just maybe, God knows something about rest, something about franchise even, something about economy and money and business that we might not understand? God might know something that we might not understand about this. Because let's face it, we cannot fathom how... I mean, obviously Chick-fil-A is amazing. You know, you can't get any better food than Chick-fil-A. But how can you understand God? How can God understand something more than us about this idea of business? Guys, I want to talk today about the fourth of the Ten Commandments. The commandment that says this, and I quote from Exodus chapter 20, starting at verse 8. It says, "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." Guys, there's a story about two lumberjacks. And these lumberjacks got into a competition. Who can chop the most wood in a single day? and they both were confident that they were going to win. So they started going at it. They started chopping the wood, chopping off. After an hour, one lumberjack stopped, and he sat down, and he just started just resting. And the other lumberjack just kept going and going and going and chopping away. Then the other lumberjack got back up and started going again. After another couple hours, the same lumberjack sat down again and just started relaxing, started resting. The other lumberjack kept going, and then they both eventually kept going. Then lunchtime came around, and the same lumberjack took an extended lunch break. He relaxed. He just was enjoying everything around him, and he was just relaxing. While the other lumberjack stopped for a quick 5 minutes to eat his food, to drink, and just get re-nourished, and he went back at it. And it was like this for the entire day. And at the end of the day, you probably can guess which lumberjack cut the most wood based off of what I'm preaching on right now. The lumberjack that rested cut significantly more wood than the other lumberjack that was working constantly throughout the day. And the other lumberjack was like, how could you have cut so much wood when you rested for so long? And the other lumberjack said, well, you probably didn't notice, but every time I rested, I was sharpening my axe. Guys, God understands a principle that we probably might not fully understand about resting and how important it is in our lives. Because let's face it, our lives can be so wound up in anxiety and stress of, I got to get this done. I got to do this work. I need to do this and that. I promised this person this, that I would help them with that. And we find ourselves falling asleep at night, and we're stressing out about all the things that we need to do in the next day, or all the things that we forgot to do today. Guys, there is an idea that we need to understand, and that is God-given idea of you need to rest. You need to rest. You see, what is the Sabbath? What is the Sabbath? What is this day that God is commanding us to live out? What is this day that God commands us to stop and refrain from all work? What is the Sabbath? Well, first of all, I want to tell you what the Sabbath isn't. The Sabbath is not an excuse to be lazy. It's not an excuse to take an entire day and do absolutely nothing. I mean, let's face it, if a parent came up to their kid and said, hey, clean your room, it looks like a mess, and the kid just looks at his parent and says, I'm sorry, Mom, this is my Sabbath day. I can't clean my room. I can't do any work today because I have to rest. Now, that's not what the Sabbath is at all. The Sabbath isn't strictly about not working. It's not an excuse to become lazy. At the same time, the Sabbath isn't something that we are bound to. It's not something that we are restricted by. I know a bunch of people that won't even go to a restaurant on Sunday mornings because because we're causing other people to work, so therefore we are causing them to sin. It is not something that we are bound to so strictly. And where do I get that from? You look throughout Jesus' ministry, there are multiple times when Jesus does work, quotes, on a Sabbath, and the Pharisees are always trying to trip him up. And there was this one time when there was a man with a withered hand, and Jesus came up to him and had compassion on him. But the Pharisees were looking at him thinking, is he going to sin? Is he going to do some kind of work on this Sabbath day? And Jesus knew their hearts, and he looked at them and he said, he was confused, and he was like, why are you so strict with these rules? You look at the rules that the Pharisees have accumulated since God gave this command to Moses, and they created these ridiculous rules about what the Sabbath is and what you can and cannot do on the Sabbath. Like, you can't go travel so many miles from your house on the Sabbath. So what they would do the day before is they would take something that is theirs, they would travel that distance and set it on the ground. So their property technically extended to there. And then the next day, on the Sabbath day, they could go out to where their property extended and then go so many miles from that point of property. They've made these ridiculous rules of what you can and cannot do on Sabbath. And Jesus was saying, this isn't what Sabbath is about. Sabbath isn't anything like this. We see another time when the Pharisees are trying to trip Jesus up because his disciples were eating grains that they had to pick from fields on a Sabbath. And they were like, look at these disciples of yours. What are they doing working on a Sabbath? And Jesus looks at them and tells them different things, but he ends with this. He says, and this is found in Mark chapter 2, he says, man was not made for the Sabbath, but Sabbath was made for the man. Let's say that again. Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. What does that mean? That means Jesus saw mankind and he instituted a day for man to rest, for man. See, we look at all the other 10 commandments, we understand, obviously we don't murder, we don't commit adultery. Obviously we're supposed to love the Lord first and have no other gods before him. And we see these commands and we understand them, but this commandment doesn't make sense to us because this command is a direct command for us to rest. And Jesus says that the Sabbath was made for man. God made this commandment for us. And this commandment God instituted from the very beginning during his creation. He created everything in 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested. Why? Why? Because God doesn't need to rest. He's God. Why would God need to rest? Well, maybe it goes beyond just the idea that God wanted to rest, but God wanted to institute something into his creation, into the fabric of the world, that you work for 6 days, but you take a single day to stop work and to rest, to stop everything and rest. Now, in theory, we like the idea of resting. We like to think, yes, I want to take a nap. Yes, I want to do this. But in practice, it is one of the hardest things to do. I mean, if you are a youth, you feel like you have no time because you got all this schoolwork, all these relationships. But then you graduate high school, and then you get into college, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I have far less time than I had before. And then whenever you graduate from college, you realize you have absolutely no time anymore. And we think the idea of resting is inexistent. I have no time to rest. And God is saying, he's actually commanding us, you have to rest, or else you will crash and burn. You know, if we are constantly moving and constantly in motion, basically, if you are running a race that never ends and you are constantly running and running and running, eventually you're going to fall on your face because you can't run anymore. And that is why God tells us you need to rest. Your body physically can't handle it. Your body emotionally cannot handle it. But also you cannot spiritually handle constant motion without rest. And God saw this from the very beginning, and he said, you need to stop, you need to breathe, and you need to trust me. You know, trust is a big part of resting because, let's face it, we think if I don't do this right now, if I'm not working, then it's not going to be done, then I'm going to be losing money, then I'm going to... Look at Chick-fil-A. They spend an entire day of doing nothing, yet they make more money per store per year than any other fast food chain. Now you think that if you have to do it right now, that God won't be able to help you or provide for you? Maybe God knows something that you might not know. See, God created this idea of rest because he knew that we needed it. He knew that we needed it. But the Sabbath, this idea of Sabbath isn't just for us to rest and recharge physically or emotionally, but it is a time for us to rest and recharge spiritually. And it goes into that idea of time. I don't have time to do this. Well, so many times I hear people say, I don't have time to read the Bible. I don't have time to pray. I don't have time to focus on God. Well, God wants you to have an entire day devoted to Him. You see, when we have this Sabbath day, it's not a day that God is saying, take a day off and do whatever you want. That's not what He's saying. He's saying, take a day off from all the work and all the struggles and all the pains of life and focus on me. That's why we have church on Sundays, so that we can have a time where we can corporately come together and worship God for what He is and what He has done for us and who He is. It is a time where we can stop our minds from the focus and the pains of this world, and we can actually start to rest and relax in the comfort that God has for us. You see, this idea of resting is great in theory, but so difficult to practice. But God is even putting it in His 10 commandments, in His list of 10 things that we should follow. Out of all the things that He could have said, this is one of those things. To rest. To rest. But not just to rest, but to rest in me. I want you to rest and relax and trust me. Trust me. Jesus even understood the idea of rest, because although He was fully God, He was also fully man, and Jesus would constantly be withdrawing from the stresses and from everything around Him. He would withdraw into a place and focus on His relationship with His Father, and He would pray and call out to God and seek God's guidance. He knew that rest was necessary. Guys, with this idea of rest, we need to realize that God knows our humanity, and God is commanding us to relax. There's so much stress around you, but take some time to rest in me. To rest in me. Trust me. Trust that I know something that you might not know. Trust that I understand something that you might not understand. Trust that I want you to live with energy, with strength. And if you're constantly moving, you're just going to run out. You're going to burn out and you're going to fall. But trust that I know what I'm doing when I tell you to take a day and rest. Just rest. And rest in me. Rest in me. And then whenever you start to understand and take this time of rest seriously, then you will begin to see that you are working harder, that you are working more efficiently, that you are working with a better fervor and with a greater energy in life, in love, in everything that you do. Chick-fil-A is known for having workers that are cheerful and encouraging and uplifting because they can rest. But guys, God wants you to rest so that you can be strengthened and encouraged and motivated and uplifted and ready to dive into Monday morning. Guys, I want to end with Psalm 23, the resting psalm. Psalm that comes from David and only comes from a place where David learned the importance of resting in his God. And David says this. He says, "The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me along paths of righteousness for His name's sake. And even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for I know that You are with me. Your rod and Your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oils, and my cup overflows. Surely Your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." We need to realize that God knows something about rest that we might not understand. And we need to trust in Him and trust in this commandment that says, don't work every day. Take 6 days. 6 days you work. There's a time to work, but there's also a time to rest. Rest in me. Rest in what I have. Rest in what I am. And see that I am good. See that I love you so much that I am telling you to rest.